Jack's Essential here. Before I begin this video, I want to make a disclaimer that we are not going to be discussing very much the massacre that took place in Mount Carmel, Texas in 1993. We're not going to be accusing anyone of who was responsible for that disaster that took place across 51 days, or I believe that time was. Today we're going to be discussing a cult that had some notoriety back in the mid to late 20th century and promptly ended with the death of David Koresh, otherwise known as Vernon Howell, during the massacre in 1993. We are going to be talking about the cult in which David Koresh became the leader of, how it became somewhat followed in the United States and abroad, in countries like Australia, parts of Asia, Mexico, Canada. So, let us get right into this very sensitive subject. And by the way, this video is not accusing the Seventh-day Adventists of anything. We are discussing merely the change in theologies. So, the birth of the Branch-Davidians. Before the Branch-Davidians became one of the biggest news stories of 1993, they were a religious offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists called Davidians, or, quote, shepherd's rod. The Davidians were established around 1929 or 1930 by Victor Hutif, who believed that the Messiah was yet to come and that he and his followers would establish a new kingdom during the apocalypse. As Vox reports, Hutif established a society of Davidians at Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas, and taught his followers that this compound would be the center of the kingdom to come. But Hutif also told his followers that he would not die. Thus, his death in 1955 threw the group in disarray. The ensuing power vacuum set up a standoff between Hutif's widow, Florence, and another Davidian, Benjamin Rodin, who claimed to be in contact with God. Waco history reports that Rodin gained the upper hand when Florence Hutif wrongly predicted that the world would end in 1959. Davidians drifted to Rodin's side and called themselves Branch-Davidians. Rodin had a strong hold on the group. Upon his death in 1978, his wife Lois Rodin took over, and power seemed poised to pass to their son George. But in 1981, a charming Bible teacher arrived at Mount Carmel. His name was Vernon Howell, but the world would soon know him as David Koresh. How David Koresh took control of the Branch-Davidians movement. Long before David Koresh became known as the leader of the Branch-Davidians, he was just a boy called Vernie, born in 1959 in Houston, Texas. To a single teenage mother, Koresh struggled in school. He later claimed that he was a frequent target of bullies. According to CNN, he grew up liking just two things: music and going to church with his grandmother. Koresh started giving biblical lectures from a young age and seemed to have an encyclopedic knowledge of biblical figures. He worshipped at a local Seventh-day Adventist church, but he was expelled after he got the preacher's daughter pregnant. In the wake of the scandal, Koresh jumped in his yellow Buick and drove to join the Branch-Davidians. CNN notes that many Branch-Davidians were unsure of Koresh at first, or Vern Howell as he was known back then, before he legally changed his name. He stuttered, looked like a, quote, bum, and struck some members as crazy. I guess one could even consider that they saw him as flaky. And for all intents and purposes, he likely was. But one Branch Davidian liked Koresh from the beginning. That was their leader, Lois Rodin. The two may have also had a sexual relationship, and as Lois Rodin supported Koresh, Branch Davidians started to see him in a different light. Okay, so this photo, sorry, the screen is cutting off. David Koresh with his first and only legal wife, Rachel, and their two children, Star and Cyrus. All four perished when the FBI raided the Branch Davidian compound in 1993. Well, the raid was considerably a failed raid. But we won't be discussing that today, like I said. I remember in the beginning, everybody was just, quote, oh, he's crazy, you know? He's this and that. That's all I heard, end quote. Former Branch Davidian Kathy Jones explained in an interview with CNN, quote, and then for all of a sudden people were saying, we're just listening to him. He has a message, end quote. As the New Yorker notes, Koresh awed many Branch Davidians with his extensive biblical knowledge. One, Clive Doyle, admitted that he had previously wrestled with accepting Lois Rodin as God's messenger, but after listening to Koresh, Doyle was impressed and felt, quote, this was of God, end quote. Following Lois Rodin's death, Koresh engaged in a power struggle with her son George, but after George was sentenced to prison for killing another rival, Koresh established himself as the leader of the Branch Davidians by 1990. It was then that he emerged. It was then that he changed his name from Vernon Howell to David Koresh and preached that he was the Lamb prophesied in the Bible to unlock the seven seals and understand God's plan for the end times. As the Lamb, Koresh reportedly took a number of wives, some as young as 12. But allegations of sexual abuse weren't what brought the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or the ATF, to Mount Carmel in 1993. It was the suspicion that the Branch Davidians were stockpiling guns, which it later turned out they were. So, that's what essentially led to the 51-day siege of Mount Carmel in Waco. There was, of course, an FBI agent known as Rodriguez, I believe, who infiltrated the cult, went to a few of the Bible sessions, and very quickly realized that this doomsday cult was a public safety threat. So it led to the FBI trying to get a search warrant. Yeah. So, all right. Now, some other Davidian groups. For those who don't know, Davidian means second coming of David, because the Messiah has to be from the lineage of David, and if the belief that Jesus Christ is of the lineage of David, his second coming will be the restoration of the house of David. Once again. So, David Koresh, Vern Howell changed his name to David Koresh because he believed that not only was he the sinful Messiah, as he put it, that was sent by God to empathize with people in a better way because he sinned. He knew very well how to sin. He completely admitted that he sinned, and it gave him permission to um, teach his members a lesson by um, yeah, to the young girls and some women. Now, according to the Branch-Davidian groups that kind of splintered off after the horrible raid in '93, there's the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Association, headquartered in Exeter, Missouri, and the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists in Salem, South Carolina. Both groups were recognized in the early 1960s to continue what they saw as the original teachings of the Davidian SDAs. Neither had any connection to Koresh or the Branch-Davidians. Okay, so several branches of Branch-Davidians, put it that way. Koresh is just the one from Texas and set up shop in Waco. Well, he didn't set up shop. He didn't set up the branch. It already existed. He just rose to prominence in the group and became the group leader. Group autocrat. Now, this video is probably not going to be very long because there's too much to speculate, and there is a lot of controversy around how the raid was handled, and also how Attorney General at the time, Janet Reno, authorized the use of tear gas and sort of brutal coaxing to get the hostages out, because Koresh was holding his members, or telling his members, to stay and endure the standoff between himself and the FBI. And it got to a point where both sides were in a firefight, and the members in the compound were using the guns that they had stockpiled to shoot at the FBI tanks. And 4 FBI agents were shot and killed. Or federal agents, I don't know. The ATF was also involved, so it was a complete disaster. Now, what we have here is a website that has compiled David Koresh's sermons and studies that supposedly are less altered than what the media portrayed. Some of these are what the FBI had wiretapped through the compound. The tapes from the hostage negotiations, in which one of Koresh's demands was to have about an hour-long sermon aired on live TV, and some of the hostages would be released. Keep in mind, this lasted over 50 days, and he let some of his members go free, but he never let his own biological children leave, because he had quite a few, and, well, 15 at least, that we know of, because one of the rules in his Branch-Davidian group was for the male members to take vows of celibacy and have, so that he might have divinely granted free reign over the women. And those women, according to their own accounts, were thrilled to have the idea that the children that they would bear through David's seed would be literal children of God, because they believed David was of God, almost to the point where they believed he was the second coming incarnate. He's the lamb. Jesus is the symbolic lamb in the Bible. So there comes to be a lot of deep psychological and symbolic connections that these members put together. So here's some, amongst these compiled sources are perhaps some inspired verses in the chapters in the Bible that David would have preached about. So here's Ezekiel 21, and yeah.
Davidian Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Study Tape 1. Subject, Ezekiel 21. Date, 10th month, 19th day, 1984. The subject we're dealing with tonight is contained in Ezekiel chapter 21, a prophecy relating to the first, second, third angel's message in the judgment of the living. Prophecy depicting God's character in dealing with the judgment of the living. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face toward Jerusalem, and drop thy word toward the holy places, and prophesy against the land of Israel. The word of God comes to Ezekiel, also entitled the Son of Man. Son of Man is used in several places, but mainly in the prophecies of Ezekiel. Also, one line of the Son of Man is contained in...
The audio quality is not great, as the website kind of recommends you wear headphones to listen to them. But you get the sense that David was deeply focusing in his sermons on the prophesized end times and apocalypse, and not to mention the 7 seals in the book of Revelation that mark the events that lead to the New Jerusalem eventually at the end of the Bible, after all of humanity has been engulfed in a cataclysmic state of trials and tribulations, all brought in by the aforementioned Lamb of God. They believed David was the Lamb. He went to Israel, or Palestine at the time, to sometime in the 80s, he went to Israel, came back, decided that he was the reincarnation of King Cyrus, who was a benefactor for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem after the Babylonians. And at least to these Americans in Texas, that gave him enough credibility to allow him to dictate their lives, including what they ate, what they wore, what they could or couldn't speak about in terms of the compound and what life was like for them in that community. So I believe we're going to end it right there. This was a very sensitive video, and I did not get into the details of everything, because some of the details are graphic, and some words I could not mention on YouTube at the risk of being demonetized. So, that in mind, if you would like to look into the various accounts and documentaries on the events at Waco, Texas, the links to the websites that I've shown will be in the description. And that's about it. So, see ya.